If you wanted the driving experience of a small BMW SUV but didn't want the BMW name or the BMW's interesting design, then you should be looking at the Mini Countryman John Cooper Works. It's also such a fun car to drive, and with the John Cooper Works model, you're basically getting the BMW X1 or the X2 at the racier M35i trim, which means that you'll get the hotter engine tune, the beefier brakes, and also those quad exhaust. But with this Mini, you don't get the questionable BMW exterior design, but you do get the questionable Mini interior design, which, if I had to sum up with one word, annoying. Let's start with what is good. I love the driving experience of the John Cooper Works Countryman. It is one quick car. It is powered by a 2-liter turbo 4, making 312 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque. Mated to a 7-speed dual-clutch gearbox with the all-wheel drive system, and this will go 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds. It also handles pretty well. With the all-4, it has the all-wheel drive system, so there's a rally car vibe to this whole thing. This is a front-wheel drive-based all-wheel drive car, so with all of that horsepower and torque, you do have to kind of wrangle the steering wheel sometimes because there's a lot of torque steer up there. But the chassis feels pretty solid, and check out these really beefy brakes. You get those cross-drilled rotors, 4-piston fixed calipers, and these 20-inch wheels. And also those tires, you get those Pirelli P0s, which is a lot of fun. And since it's a small SUV and doesn't weigh too terribly much, somewhere around under 3,800 pounds, this thing feels pretty nimble, which lives up to the Mini name and mantra, even though there's really nothing about the Countryman that looks Mini about it. Now, when it comes to the exterior design, you don't have that ghastly BMW kidney grills to look at, but you do have a fairly busy Mini grille to look at here. Now, this has been redesigned for the 2025 model year. The BMW X1 was new to the platform in model year 2023. Then for 2024, they brought over the BMW X2, and for the 2025 model year, they brought over the Mini Countryman. And just like how the BMW SUVs ditched the curvier design, this Mini Countryman looks a lot more boxy, more angular, and just more chiseled altogether, from the headlights all the way to the different grille elements and the rest of the car. The John Cooper Works version adds a lot of racy bits to this thing, like a lot of the checkered flag patterns all over the grille. You've got this red vertical trim element here. We've talked about the brakes, how they look very racy, and you get this two-tone paint with the dark gray and the red roof and the red side view mirrors. And the red roof really does a lot of visual tricks to make the car look more Mini than SUV. And I really like this continuous belt line from the front to the rear of the vehicle. It really gives it a very athletic stance. And if you check this out, there's this plate here that says John Cooper Works and all 4. But why is that there? Because if you open the door, this is nothing but purely cosmetic. You let me know in the comments whether you'd have something like this that's more cosmetic or maybe better visibility looking out the back. And at the back, I think this is all very positive looking here. It looks really good. Again, that belt line curves around to the hatch, which looks really nice. And that awful Union Jack turn signals is gone. You still see it in some of the patterns here, but when the turn signals are turned on, you don't get that awful arrow that points to the opposite way in which you're turning. And out back you get the raciest design bit, which is the quad exhaust, and it looks pretty ridiculous in a car like this, but it shows the intentions of this car, and that's okay with me. Overall, this is not a bad looking car, and it's unique on its own that it stands apart from its BMW cousin pretty well. Now, before we continue on with the review, I've got a pretty important message. When you're shopping around for a car, you'll have to provide a lot of personal information just to get a quote or even schedule a test drive. Your phone number, your email address, your ID, all of this is fair game for dealers and even private sellers to ask for. But what happens if these companies get hacked? All of your personal information, from your phone to your card information, could be out there vulnerable to hackers, spammers, and scammers. Take AT&T, for example. Recently, they revealed there was a data breach that leaked over 73 million customer records, both existing and former, onto the dark web. Unfortunately, companies you trust can be the ones putting your information at risk. And did you know that information can be sold to data brokers who make a business out of trading personal information? That's a scary thought, that our personal information is being passed around like a hot potato with no regard for our privacy or our security. And that's why I've started using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura is like a digital watchdog, constantly monitoring for any signs that my personal information has been compromised. They alert me if my details pop up on the dark web or if data brokers are trying to sell my information. And they even help me remove my info from their databases. In today's world where data breaches and identity theft are becoming all too common, having a service like Aura is essential. They give you peace of mind knowing that someone's got your back online, so you can focus on enjoying your new ride without worrying about who might be taking a joyride with your personal information. So if you value your privacy as much as I do, then head on over to the link below, aura.com/shiftinglanes, to start your 2-week free trial. Trust me, when it comes to protecting your digital life, Aura is the ultimate co-pilot. Now back to the review. Inside, however, this is where the Countryman starts to get pretty damn annoying. First of all, whether you like the interior or not, I think that's going to come down to personal tastes. I don't mind the look and feel of what you see here. I think it's fairly unique. There's a combination of plastics and also woven-like material on a lot of the dash, and when you combine it with some of the ambient lighting inside, it really produces an interesting effect. First, let's start this up, and to do that, you don't have a start button, but you do have this knob here that you turn kind of like a traditional old school key. And you don't get a screen up here. You do get a heads-up display which has your speedometer, but this 9.4-inch diameter display is your primary display. And this is a very high-end looking screen. This is an OLED screen, which is basically what your smartphones and higher-end TVs are made of. It's very crisp. It looks like a high-end display. It doesn't look cheap at all. The problem I have with this is that I think the user interface engineers were more focused on how this should look compared to how this is actually going to be used in real life. I think the most critical functions of this screen are these 5 little buttons down here. They're your climate control, your stereo, your apps, your navigation, and your phone. They happen to be one of the smallest buttons on this screen, and even though they say that you shouldn't be playing with the screen while you're driving, people will do that anyway because that's what people do in cars. And when you're driving, your hand is going to go up and down, so chances are you're going to mishit one of these functions and you're going to end up elsewhere. And that problem's compounded by the fact that there's no finger ledge down here, so that you can't really rest your hand anywhere and get more confidence in what you're trying to press. And there's also a lot to look at on the screen because this is where everything resides, like your speedometer, your fuel gauge, your power gauge, which doesn't really make much sense because why not just have RPM on there, and then your climate controls, and then all of the warning lights would be over here somewhere. This also comes with massaging seats, which if you want to turn it on, you would think that by pressing on the seat button, it'll give you access to it, but no, you have to go into the menus, and then you gotta go into seat comfort, and then over to massage, and then turn it on. I'm sure that once you get used to everything, it'll be an okay experience, but I think they should get back to the drawing board on this because it's not really very intuitive. Now, the other very annoying feature in this car is a combination of this user interface and then the 7-speed dual clutch gearbox. Now, first of all, a note on the dual clutch transmission. If you've never driven a dual clutch transmission before, you may think that there's something wrong with this car because in some situations, it'll feel like there's a good amount of hesitation. That is the inherent design of these dual clutch transmissions. They're just like manual transmissions, but the clutching and declutching, all of that has been automated. And you have 2 clutches instead of 1, so that's how you get these lightning quick gear changes. But just like manual transmissions, when you're at a standstill and you're just accelerating, there's that little bit of hesitation where you normally try to ease off the clutch so that your engine and your drivetrain can become connected. That also happens in a dual clutch transmission, but it is invisible to you. And because you're not controlling it, sometimes it can feel inconsistent, and sometimes that hesitation can feel longer than other times. So because of that, you have this disconnected feel with the driving experience. Once you're moving though, the dual clutch is one of the finest transmissions you can get out there because they shift super lightning quick, and they're also very responsive depending on how the engineers tune the transmissions for the different driving modes. So on a racetrack, the dual clutch is where it's most happy, but when your commute involves a lot of stoplights and a lot of traffic, then you might want to skip the dual clutch transmission. The problem here is the dual clutch transmission with the auto start-stop feature of the Mini Countryman. Now, combine that hesitation or that pause when you're moving from a standstill with the pause of having to wait for the engine to turn on. Those very slight pauses, they're very brief, they can seem like an eternity. Again, adding to that disconnected feel between you and the actual car. Now, you can turn off the auto start-stop feature, and to do that, you have to go into here, and then you go into driving settings, and then you turn off the auto start-stop. The problem here is that by default, the auto start-stop is always turned on. So you have to go into those button pushes to turn the feature off. Now, thankfully, they have added some physical controls here for the more critical functions, like your 360-degree camera view, and then your defrosters, and thankfully, the volume control is still physical. To turn on and off that auto start-stop feature, they have provided you with this button there, just like the BMW X2 and X1, and there is where you could turn off the auto start-stop feature. Now, if they can just keep this turned off by default, that would be great. The rest of the car isn't as annoying. I love this door handle here. It feels pretty nice. It opens up kind of non-traditionally, which adds to the quirkiness of the car. I think the seats look pretty modern and they feel pretty nice, though they're not as supportive from a bolster perspective as the M Sport seats that you could find in the BMW X2. Down below, we have a wireless charger, a couple of cup holders, and also a mini storage for your belongings. And right behind that, you have a couple of USB ports, and here is your armrest, which you can slide all the way forward and backwards. As for the second row, there is a good amount of legroom back here at 37 inches. And given that this is a small car, you do get very few features like those climate controls and a couple of USB-C ports. As for cargo, you do get 25 cubic feet of space behind the second row. Fold the second row down, which splits 40, 20, 40, and you get 56 cubic feet of space. And while we're back here, check out those LED taillights, and here's where you get that Union Jack pattern. And thankfully, when you have the blinkers on, it no longer confuses the drivers behind you because it's not showing an arrow pointing to the opposite direction in which you're turning. Now, if you could look past some of the frustrating interior features, the Mini Countryman is actually a really good car. It's got a gutsy engine, nice all-wheel drive traction, albeit on some days like this, there could be a lot of torque steer in the front, so you really got to be careful on wet days. And it's got a fast shifting 7-speed dual clutch gearbox, great handling. And you know what? It's not as expensive as the BMW X1 or the BMW X2. This thing is about $8,000 cheaper than the BMW X2 M35i. So basically the same car, but you don't get that BMW exterior design and you don't pay BMW prices. And you also don't get that big snout in the front of the BMW X1 and the X2. Speaking of which, if you want to check out my video review of the BMW X1 and the BMW X2, check out these video reviews right over here. I want to thank you so much for watching all the way up to this point. My name is Hanson, and that has been the 2025 Mini Countryman John Cooper Works All 4, and I'll see you in the next one.